In a separate video, I talked about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of affordable housing policies. Those policies are in documents that are drafted by different organizations in our state, and they go through extensive public comment periods and then become the written goals of those limited public resources. One of the several things that those policies are rooted in is in our understanding of the housing needs of our residents. I've discussed how the history of housing funding moved from being primarily based with the federal government to how it devolved to the states in recognition that it's the states that know best the local housing markets and nuances as well as needs of its residents. To ensure that we're looking at data and the most pressing housing needs, the Federal Housing Department, called HUD, requires that the state of Vermont, as well as the city of Burlington, conduct a comprehensive housing needs assessment every 5 years in order to receive some of the federal funding around housing. Each community has its own unique features, history, settlement patterns, industries, which make its housing needs very unique. That's why we encourage communities to do a deep dive into their local housing needs, and VHFA provides the tools and the data to do just that. We will have a video on those resources at another time. The latest statewide housing needs assessment was completed in 2020, and I'm going to walk you through the overall trends for the state of Vermont. The first most clear impact that we know when we look at the housing needs are that the pace of residential construction has dropped off considerably from where it was 30 years ago, and that is even far lower than it was in the 60s and 70s when the US had a housing boom. There's virtual stagnation in the number of year-round Vermont homes, and our new construction is barely keeping up with the homes that come off the market due to properties either converting to seasonal or vacation use or homes being uninhabitable due to their deteriorating condition. When we look at where Vermont's population is, we know that most of the state's growth is expected to be in northwestern Vermont, and southern Vermont is expected to see fewer households. It's also important that we remember to look at the number of households and not just the population of our state. There have been times where in communities when the population has shrunk, but the number of households has grown. And that's because our household sizes are getting smaller. And so if you can imagine a family of 2 parents with 2 children who occupy one household and therefore need one home. But as those children grow, they will go off on their own, hopefully, and they will need 2 separate household homes. And so now you have 3 homes were needed where previously only 1 was. Maybe that couple ends up splitting up or getting a divorce. And if that happens, you now have 4 homes where previously you needed 1. And so you'll often hear us talk about the needs of households as opposed to the population because while they generally move in line, that's not always the case. And as we see household sizes shrink, we see more need for more housing statewide. Another one of the most pressing housing needs in our state is that low-income households have unmet housing needs. We call people who are paying too much for their housing cost-burdened. And the standard that is typically used is that households should not pay more than 30% of their income for their housing costs, including their utilities. Otherwise, they're cost-burdened. And that means that if you're spending more than 30% on your housing costs, then you likely won't have enough for unexpected healthcare, educational, or emergency needs. And so what we found in the last housing needs assessment was that the lower the household's income, the more likely someone is to be cost burdened, which puts them at greater risk of being homeless if there is a foreclosure or an eviction due to not being able to afford that home. Housing quality is also a challenge for much of Vermont. For those already paying too much of their income for housing, the added costs of utilities, repair, and upkeep can make the housing even more unaffordable. There are thousands of Vermont homes with poor housing quality that further limits the housing opportunities for Vermont residents. Vermont also has a high need for service-enriched housing that comes with social services that helps to stabilize and support the residents. There are thousands of Vermonters who are low income and have a disability. Frail seniors, as well as many younger Vermonters with significant disabilities, far outnumber the supportive services available to them to live independently in their homes. Additionally, Vermont consistently has a relatively high rate of people experiencing homelessness compared to other states. There have been several reports over the years that have quantified how many new permanent supported housing apartments the state needs, as well as what solutions have and could work to support Vermonters to successfully live independently. The face and needs of Vermont's residents changes regularly, and yet some persistent housing needs have faced our state for decades. We're responsible for monitoring the demographic, housing, and cost changes frequently, and ensuring that public resources are focused on those who need it most. I encourage you to go to VHFA's Housing Data website and learn more about the information available.